Well, welcome back after our break, and we move from the discussion of Ezra, somewhat Nehemiah, but Ezra, now to focus a bit on Esther. And I brought up a slide presentation I'd like to share with you about the book of Esther, and I think I'll point out the importance of Esther and the holiday that is actually today in 2026. Monday, March 2nd, today and tomorrow, mark the Jewish festival of Purim, or the festival of lots, Lots, like as in casting lots. We also note that here in March of 2026, the U.S. and Israel launched strikes against the modern country of Iran. It's somewhat ironic and yet poetic and historic that at least for most all of my lifetime and probably yours, uh, there have been tensions between the United States and Iran, the same land as the ancient Persians. And I mean, we think of the Iran hostage crisis in the 70s under the Carter administration, probably the main reason for which he did not get reelected. We probably grew up hearing about the exiled Shah of Iran, who eventually came to the United States with permission of the US government to receive cancer treatments and settled in the Los Angeles area. Uh, LA has a huge Persian population, people who did not want to live under the Islamist regime with the Ayatollahs. And so um, perhaps we've also learned a bit about Persian culture. Uh, they are Muslim today, but they are not Sunni Muslim, but Shiite. And so they're a bit of a minority due to some differing interpretations about the succession after Muhammad, who should, what should Islam look like, and what are the authorities to which people turn. So these two major schools of thought within Islam, Shiite and Sunni. The Sunni is the majority in most of the Middle East, like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, uh, people in the Levant, those who call themselves Palestinian, or people in Jordan and Syria. These would be Sunni Muslims, but in Iran, they are of the Shia faction or called Shiites. And so, again, for most of our lifetimes, those who are adults in the now 2020s, um, we would have known Iran as being this Islamic republic, this hardcore uh, Sharia landscape in which uh, a a strong enforcement governmentally of Islam is associated with Iran today. And yet, in the diaspora communities of Persians, like those in Los Angeles and such, with the airstrikes by the US and Israel, they are dancing in the streets and waving American and Israeli flags, both in the US, in Canada, and in England, other places throughout Europe. I believe also in Australia and other countries associated with the West, people are celebrating the downfall and now even the elimination, the political assassination of the Ayatollah. So it's ironic that this airstrike happened during Ramadan and at the time of the Jewish feast of Purim, which, as we'll read about, relates to events in biblical history associated with what we call today Iran or ancient Persia. And then also, a friend texted me that these events also happened in the 9th month and the 11th day of their Persian Islamic calendar versus the Gregorian calendar. Their Hijri, Hijri, Islamic calendar would have called the day of the attack that happened just the other day, the 9/11 of
Whoa,
1447 on the Islamic calendar. Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, yeah. So, what an interesting time for us to long ago, God knew that we would be talking on this day about the book of Esther. I had no idea. I'll give again Dr. Gromacki credit for putting the syllabus together and determining what would be happening when. But in the end, God knows what's happening when. And there we go. We're here on the 9/11 of the Islamic calendar,
Yeah,
and
you have on your slide. Wow, what a story! This book of Esther is really a great book.
it really is.
Yeah.
It really is. So I'd like to talk about this book, especially from the standpoint of its own contents, and then share a little bit about how it is appreciated in the Jewish community today. So maybe one of you would read what we have here from Esther chapter 9, verses 27 and 28 from the screen.
Purim was established and made a custom for themselves and for their descendants and for all those who allied themselves with them. And these days of Purim were not to fail from among the Jews, or their memory fade from their descendants.
In other words, like many of the festivals that God gave in the, hey, by the way, do you remember the feast chapter of the Bible? Emotional extra credit if you can tell me the feast chapter of the Bible.
Leviticus 22,
Yeah,
something close,
so close,
close,
23.
23.
Yeah, something that could be on an exam. Uh, Leviticus 23, the
All
feast
right.
chapter of the Bible. And yet this is not one of those Moedim or appointed times given to Israel by God at Mount Sinai. This is something that became a celebration of a historical event long after that, during the time of the Persian Empire, in the days of Esther and Mordecai. This became an established custom, as we read in Esther chapter 9. And very much like the next holiday, which would happen in the Second Temple period, when the temple was defiled, not by Babylonians this time, but by Greeks. Remember, the Seleucids under Antiochus Epiphanes IV would come and defile the temple, and then it would be rededicated. And so the Feast of Dedication was celebrating the rededication of the temple under the Maccabees. This is the festival of Hanukkah,
I should
the
know that.
Feast of
Yeah.
Dedication, the Feast of Dedication. So Hanukkah and Purim are two holidays that are mentioned in the Bible. Purim in the Old Testament, Feast of Dedication in the New Testament. Jesus was walking among Solomon's porticos in the temple in Jerusalem, John chapter 10. during the Feast of Dedication. And by the way, that's the first time in all of Jewish literature, and I include the New Testament in Jewish literature, that Hanukkah was called the Feast of Dedication. It will eventually also become known as the Feast of Lights because of a later tradition of the oil lasting for 8 days and nights. But here is Esther chapter 9, Purim, established as a custom for themselves and for their descendants and for all who allied themselves with them. Everyone, Jews and Gentiles, are invited, as it was in the days of Esther and Mordecai, to celebrate this feast. So here we go. Here's me and my wife, Bernice, dressed up for Purim. It's common to retell the story of the book of Esther, and there are certain traditional types of people from the biblical narrative that you dress up like. The women often dress up like Esther, and men dress up like Mordecai or King Xerxes or wicked Haman. So when we were serving a congregation in the north of Israel, while I was on sabbatical from Moody Bible Institute in 0910, then we had a Purim spiel with the congregation. And of course, we've done this with our kids for years and years and years. 10 years later, I call them the Agagites of Apex because we live in Apex, North Carolina. We took out all the normal furniture of our living room and we set up chairs and we had a Purim spiel. We've done it indoors, we've done it outdoors. I think that day it was raining, so we did it all indoors. How do you like the saltwater taffy in the bottom right-hand corner? Someone
Nice.
gave us a little gift called Orthodox Chews. That was fun. And then in the middle lower photo, you have these special cookies. You know what they're called? Hamantaschen. That's the Yiddish phrase. It means Haman's hat, or Haman's hats, rather. So think of it like in the shape of a little hat that would go on Haman's head. Hamantaschen, or Haman's pockets. Little pocket cookies, with a filling inside. Or in Hebrew, we would call them oznei Haman. Ozen is the word for ear. Oznaim are your two ears, but if you put this word in the construct, you're saying the ears of Haman. So oznei Haman, the ears of Haman. Maybe it's easier to eat when you think of them as a hat than as an ear. So last night, as we got to Houston, my wife drove the whole way from Dallas, where I had spoken that morning yesterday, and then we were supposed to meet up with Dr. Fruchtenbaum and a number of our friends for this conference that we're attending in Houston. And we met at a Jewish deli called Kenny and Ziggy's in Houston, a really famous landmark, and their food is so Hamish. It's so like home cooking for yeah, it's a typical New York Jewish deli with all the fun stuff. And of course, what do they have available on the menu for Purim? They had Oznei Haman, or Hamantaschen, these special cookies. And yes, they were ordered and they were enjoyed. It's also one of these holidays that, because you're celebrating the rescue of the Jewish people from evil Haman, that people have Purim spiels. They retell the story in exciting ways, and there are certain customs that when you hear the names of Mordecai and Esther, whose name is also known as Hadassah, that you cheer, yay! So you read the Megillat Esther, the scroll of Esther, and you cheer whenever you hear the names of the good guys, Mordecai and Esther, yay! And when you hear Haman, you say boo. So this is and not only saying boo, but it's even been accustomed to write the name Haman on a piece of tape and tape that to the bottom of your foot and stamp on the ground when you hear the name Haman, like may his name be blotted out. Um, wicked, wicked Haman. So because it's common to retell the story and look, I've even heard the Purim spiel retell the story of Esther to the tune of Copacabana, or with a you know uh, little uh, oh, what would you call all those common instruments? I've never, this is not quite my time period, but Copacabana music. We're talking like uh, uh, themes of beach bands and things like this. And a friend of mine did such a great impersonation of this type of music. Her, yeah, I'm not even gonna try. But I did end up for one year writing a song uh, for a Purim spiel. Here it is. It's called Haman the Anti-Semite, and it was to the tune of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. So I guess this is 20 years ago I wrote this, and uh, surprised people who didn't know I played the piano and sing it to a group. Uh, this is the time of year to do these fun, crazy things. Telling the story of Esther. It's you got to see that this is one happy holiday. It's like God's mercy and the salvation, the 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 freeing, the rescue of the Jewish people. So lots of fun on a holiday like this. So let's give it a try. To the tune of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. You know Pharaoh and Agag and Herod the Great One, Antiochus Epiphanes the pig-killing pagan. But do you recall the most prototypical anti-Semite of all? And you can imagine the arpeggios going up the piano. Haman, the anti-Semite,
Semite,
Semite. Yeah, you got it. Had it in for all the
the
Jews.
Jews,
If you don't know the
know the
story,
story.
this song will give
I'll
you
give
all
you
the
the
news.
news.
All of the other Persians didn't really care at all. But when it came to Haman, he thought the deaths would be a ball. Bum, bum, bum. Then one fearful Purim Eve, Xerxes came to say, dun, 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 Haman, with your plans all down, won't you guide my steed through town? Then Mordecai was honored, paraded on the royal horse. He didn't bow to Haman, who was really mad, of course. So Haman hoped to hang him, built a gallows very high. But due to Esther's courage, God manifested his loving faithfulness to the Jewish people, and in a masterful act of irony, worked it out so that on the very gallows he himself had built, Haman was soon to die. Boom, boom, boom. Then Artaxerxes hanged him, a fact remembered now with glee. Haman the anti-Semite, you'll go down in infamy. There it is.
Very good. Very
Sorry
good.
I didn't practice before tonight, but we
You're
probably sing
you're
it
the
every year.
you're the architect of that song.
Yes, 20 years ago.
Wow, that's really good.
That is good.
Sometimes old talents have to be resurrected that you haven't used for a long time, and then people laugh. That and
So,
that's the point of a Purim spiel.
so I have a question. Is this going to be on the test?
It should be, shouldn't it? But no, I'm sorry. Well, from the ridiculous to the sublime now. Um, I think of Psalm 91, verse 1. Maybe one of you would read this for us.
He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. Psalms 91, 1.
Yeah, it really is God's preservation of the Jewish people. You think of who all tried to annihilate the Jewish people. And it's not like any other prejudice or you know, xenophobic fear of the other. It it has rightly been spoken of as the satanically inspired hatred of the Jews, anti-Semitism. And anti-Semitism, it should be understood, is not merely the dislike of Jewish people or the lack of appreciation of Jewish culture. Like, it's not just someone says, I don't like matzo ball soup, or, we're not talking about liking the culture or disliking it. Anti-Semitism at its heart has always been about killing the Jews, about annihilating the Jews. So whether we see biblical antecedents to this of Herod trying to kill all the male children of the Hebrews in Egypt, or it's um, Herod the Great killing the babies around Jerusalem, or we back up to Haman trying to annihilate the Jews of the Persian Empire in the days of Esther. The goal is always to kill the Jewish people. It is that satanically inspired hatred which is already predicted in the Proto-Evangelion, the first reference to the good news, the saving message, where God is promising to intervene in light of the sin of Adam and Eve in the garden, when he promises, as part of his antidote to the curse, where the Lord said to the serpent in Genesis 3:14, because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock, above all the beasts of the field. On your belly you shall go, the dust you shall eat all the days of your life. Verse 15, here's the first note of the good news. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise, or even crush, your head, and you shall bruise his heel. You see, the bruising of the head, this is a death blow. But the bruising of the heel, this is not a mortal wound. In other words, who's going to win? Is it the seed of the serpent or the seed of the woman? Is it the Messiah or is it Ha-Satan, as he is called in Hebrew, the adversary, Satan? And it's really only when you get to the book of Revelation, chapters 12 through 14, that you see this connection between, or this undeniable connection, that the serpent of old is actually Satan. He's called by various names in Scripture, but ultimately it is this scene in Revelation chapter 12 where a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and agony of giving birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great dragon, red dragon, with 7 heads and 10 horns on his head, 7 diadems his tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. Now, look, there's a lot of symbolism in here that is to be unpacked in light of the book of Daniel and even Ezekiel and Amos and other passages related to and Zechariah. Where are these places? Where and what is the woman and the whole swaths of history are referred to here? So, but whoever this woman is, the fact that she has verse 1 of Revelation 12, a crown of 12 stars, you realize ultimately the woman is Israel, who has 12 tribes, because Israel is the one through whom, according to the flesh, the male child, the Messiah, is to come, this ultimate seed of the woman. Well, verse 7 of Revelation 12, now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, the ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they loved not their lives even unto death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. Well, that's why there's a reference to that time period there in Revelation 12, verse 6, 1,260 days. Well, that's the midpoint of the tribulation period. That's when Satan will be cast down out of heaven, and he's not happy about it. And that's what makes the last half of the tribulation even worse than the first half of the tribulation, because now he's one sad serpent. He is one devastated dragon. He is one sick Satan. He is so upset. He's now going to release his fury. And who is he going to release it against? Well, largely the woman who gave birth to the male child. He's going to try to kill the Jews. It's like one more example of satanically inspired hatred of the Jewish people. It all goes back to Genesis 3:15. If God says, I love, Hasatan, the adversary, he's always against whatever God says. If God says he loves, Satan says I hate. If God says I've chosen, Satan says I've chosen against. And that's why both in the book of Revelation, we see prophecies about the satanically inspired serpentine hatred of the Jewish people, and we see it throughout human history. Multiple times, people choosing to try to kill the Jews, to wipe them out. It's as if Satan wanted to destroy the line of promise that would bring the Messiah. But God preserved the Jewish people, and through the Jewish people, the Messiah is born. Read the genealogy in Matthew chapter 1. But we can also say the Messiah came, and God used the Jewish people to bring the Messiah, and Satan has never forgiven them. It's like he also knows that he is a defeated foe, that the Messiah came, he died for our sins, he was buried, he rose from the dead, he's coming back again. But wait, if he couldn't defeat him and destroy the plan of God for the first coming, maybe he can somehow wipe out the Jewish people, and then God would not be able to fulfill his promises to restore the Jewish people with end time promises. Maybe he can stop the second coming. But again, he is a slow learner. and even though he is already defeated in the plan of God, it's not like he's going down easy. He's going to continue to rebel and rebel and rebel. So Purim is a wonderful time to remember that in the end, God wins, even if it looks like all hope is lost. And for that reason, this story is something that Jews and Gentiles, that Christians can appreciate, because in the end, who's the hero of Purim? It's not just Mordecai and Esther. In the end, it's the Lord himself. He wins. His purposes will come true. So that's my spiel about Purim and how it relates to anti-Semitism and why it's a story that needs to be told even today. Any thoughts on your part? Any response?
Yeah, I was hearing a lot on social media where people were talking about how interesting it was that it's Purim right now, and the attacks on Iran, and that was probably strategic, at least maybe in the strategy of Israel.
Mm-hmm. Yes. During Ramadan, on Purim, and 9/11 in the Islamic calendar.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing, isn't it?
It really is. And, of course, this is something that the history books will write about from multiple perspectives for decades and decades to come. And it happened in our days. So here's a little something that I have appreciated, because the reading of Megillat Esther, or the Scroll of Esther, is traditional in the synagogue. You go and you have again, this is a very happy holiday. This is celebrating the salvation of the Jewish people. And there are 10 chapters in the book of Esther, so it could take quite a while to read this through. And instead of simply reading it, many groups have determined to do a spiel instead, a Purim play of sorts, or a retelling in some creative manner. And I appreciate that someone with lots of creativity, it was Rabbi Shimon Appisdorf, put together what he called the 1 hour Purim primer. But then others put together the 60-second Purim spiel. And we actually have time for the 60-second version. So let's give it a try. And I'd like each of you to read one of the slides. So I'm not setting a timer, but we'll try to get through this 60-second Purim spiel. And by the way, I might launch into a little booing or cheering when you come across the appropriate names. So give time for that, because that's what we do. So, all right, who will be first?
I'll start.
Okay.
King Ashurverosh throws a party. A lavish 6-month celebration marks the third year in the reign of Ahasuerus, king of Persia. Queen Vashti refuses the king's request to appear at the celebration and display her beauty for the assembled guest. The king's advisors counsel that Vashti be replaced with a new queen.
Across the Persian Empire, officials appointed to identify beautiful candidates to succeed Vashti as queen. A Jewish girl, Esther, the niece of
Yay!
Mordecai,
Yay!
is brought to the capital of Persia as one of the candidates. Mordecai,
Yay!
tells Esther
Yay!
to conceal her identity.
Esther is chosen to be the
Yay!
queen.
Yay!
Mordecai learns of the
Yay!
plot
Yay!
to overthrow the king. Mordecai informs
Yay!
Esther.
Yay!
Esther tells the king,
Yay!
and the plotters are hanged.
There we go. And this name, by the way, Achashverosh. That's how you say Ahasuerus in Hebrew. Achashverosh. Good luck.
Ahasuerus appoints Haman
Ooh.
to be his prime minister. All bow in homage to Haman.
Boo.
Mordecai
Yay.
consistently refuses to bow to Haman.
Boo.
And an enraged Haman
Boo.
vows to kill the Jews of Persia.
Really boo.
Yeah. Haman
Boo.
prevails upon Ahasuerus to destroy the Jews. A royal edict is disseminated throughout Persia. The 13th of Adar is designated as the date to exterminate all the Jews and plunder their possessions.
Boo.
Yes.
Mordecai tears his clothes
Yay.
and puts sackcloth and ashes as a signing of public mourning. Mordecai
Yay.
sends a copy of the decree to Esther
Yay.
and asks her to intercede with the king.
Esther
Yay!
replies that to approach the king without being summoned is to risk death. Mordecai
Yay!
tells her that she has no choice. Esther
Yay!
tells Mordecai
Yay!
to ask the Jews to fast and pray for 3 days before she will approach the king.
So here we go. Next.
King Ahasuerus receives Esther
Yay.
and grants her virtually any request. Esther's request
Yay.
that the king Haman
Oh, boo.
join her at a banquet.
After the banquet, Haman
Boo.
sees Mordecai,
Yay!
who once again refuses to bow. When Zeresh, Haman's wife,
Boo!
suggests that Mordecai
Yay.
be
Yay!
hanged, the gallows are prepared.
The king can't sleep and asks to hear the royal chronicles. For the first time, the king learns of the assassination plot that Mordecai had revealed.
Yay.
That night, Haman
Boo.
comes to see the king about the hanging of Mordecai.
Yay.
Before Haman can speak,
Boo!
the king tells Haman
Boo.
Mordecai
Yay!
by dressing him in royal garments, to place him on a royal stallion and to personally lead him through the streets of Shushan, the capital of Persia.
Yay!
Yes.
At a second banquet, Esther
Yay.
reveals her identity and announces that she and her people are about to be murdered. Esther
Yay.
identifies Haman
Boo.
as her arch enemy. The king has Haman
Boo.
hung on the gallows that were provided for Mordecai.
Yay.
Yay!
Mordecai
Yay!
is named prime minister to replace Haman.
Boo.
A second royal edict is promulgated, empowering the Jews to fight and kill anyone who would try to harm them.
Yay!
Yay. So here's the edict. And on the 13th of Adar, a day that had been designated for Jewish destruction, the Jews are victorious over their enemies. The 10 sons of Haman
Boo!
are hanged. The 14th and 15th of Adar are designated to celebrate the salvation. These are the days of Purim. Mordecai, yay, initiates the Purim practices, consisting of a festive meal, the exchange of gifts of food, and the giving of monetary gifts to the poor. By the way, like little care packages, this is the tradition today. Purim gifts are given, gifts of food, little care packages, or mishloach manot. How do you translate that? Sent servings, if you will. Almost like ordering carryout for someone else, or special little gifts. Because again, this is such a happy holiday, rejoicing, rejoicing. So Persia, with Mordecai as prime minister, flourishes. Yay! And the role of Mordecai, yay, in the history of the Persian Empire is recorded in the King's Chronicles. So ends the scroll of Esther. So that's a fun thing to do. I appreciate the work that went into someone boiling the 10 chapters down and into the 60-second or so Purim spiel. Kind of a fun thing. And you can imagine by our own attempts at the cheering and the booing or the stamping of the feet that this becomes a rather rowdy retelling of a biblical account. Now, here's a little something interesting. Because the book of Esther does not mention God, either by his sacred covenantal name, known as the four-letter name of God, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, the sacred tetragrammaton, that is in Jewish tradition not even pronounced out of respect for the Lord and his personal name, that it becomes transliterated as Jehovah or Yahweh or something like that in various languages. But in Jewish tradition, he is often just referred to as Hashem, the name, instead of saying his name and mispronouncing it or disrespecting it in any way. So, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, this sacred name of God, is not mentioned, and neither is even the word Elohim, God. Rather, it's almost like the term Esther itself, which means secret, that it's like a subliminal credit being given to God without saying the name or directly referring to God. David Howard, in a book that we've cited elsewhere in this course, published by Moody, his introduction to the Old Testament historical books, he writes as follows. The Masoretes, now, by the way, the Masoretes, we're talking about these Jewish scribes and scholars in Tiberias from about 1,000 years ago. The Masoretes, using various methods, identified several acrostics in the book that contain the consonants of God's name, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. They are found, look at these passages, in chapter 1, verse 20, 5, verse 4, and chapter 5, verse 13, chapter 7, verses 7 and 37. Though these are almost universally disregarded today, the one at chapter 5, verse 4, occurring in the phrase, let the king and Haman come, or in Hebrew, Yavo Hamelech veHaman, at least bears note. It is the most straightforward acrostic in Hebrew. the letters of God's name occur at the beginning of consecutive words. It's not like you're looking for these letters in some like pattern or some like, well, I can find all these letters, but they're not in any significant way that they could be intended by the author. No, wow, having them all in order in this phrase, Howard says, you know, even though most people would say, I don't know how legitimate this is to find them in all those passages, but maybe the one in chapter 5, verse 4 could be a straightforward acrostic in Hebrew that was intended by the author. Maybe this is like a hidden way of embedding a reference to Yod He Vav He, Hashem, God, in the biblical narrative. We'll note again in the middle of this quote, it is the most straightforward acrostic in Hebrew. The letters of God's name occur at the beginning of consecutive words, and it comes at a critical juncture in the story where the suspense is high concerning Esther's and the Jews' fate. Structurally, it is near the book's exact numerical midpoint. And by the way, the Masoretes counted every letter in the Hebrew text of every book of the Hebrew Bible, and they always marked what is the middle verse, what is the middle word, what is the middle letter of an entire book of the Bible. So the fact that it comes at near the book's exact numerical midpoint, that's something that Masoretes care about. It's easy to imagine, Howard goes on, that the author is whispering here by his very choice of words that God is indeed present, although silently, at this time of crisis. So that's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, that's nice.
Now, what about Purim? Purim is going to emphasize the danger of death, where Esther risks her life. But when we think of it in terms of the entirety of the biblical storyline, we would also relate this to the New Testament truth that Messiah Jesus, he lays down his life, he gives his life. It reminds me of how the book of Hebrews makes the comparison. You have all of these wonderful things that God reveals in the scripture throughout Israel's history, whether it's Moses and the giving of the law, or the building of the tabernacle and the work of the priests and the Levites and the sacrificial system. But the book of Hebrews consistently states Messiah is better. He's better. He's better. He's even better. Better than Moses, better than Aaron's priesthood, better than the Levites, better than the sacrifices of bulls and goats. Here, we'd say Messiah is even better. Facing the danger of death, Esther risks her life, but Messiah gives his life. Further, related to the hope of salvation in Purim, there is the concept of temporary relief. We say temporary relief really because the salvation of the Jews of ancient Persia, another Haman's going to come on the scene. We know this throughout Jewish history. If it's not Haman, it's Herod. If it's not Herod, it's Hitler. If it's not Hitler, it's Hamas. If it's not Hamas, it's Hezbollah. If it's not Hezbollah, it's the Houthis. I mean, just keep going. Any relief, even the relief brought by Mordecai and Esther, is a temporary relief versus what the Messiah will bring, permanent deliverance for the Jewish people and for really all who will put their trust in him. So I think Purim is a wonderful time to talk about these important themes of God's victory over the danger of death and his message of hope for salvation. Again, that verse that was read earlier, one of you could read it again from Psalm 91, verse 1.
He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. Psalms 91:1.
Yeah. It really is the Lord who has protected the Jewish people throughout history and who has a plan to draw Jewish people to salvation today and who will one day in the future. We read from Revelation chapter 12, who will cause the woman to have victory over the serpent of old. This oldest hatred, the hatred of the Jewish people, is something acknowledged at Purim, but it's something that is removed only through the victory of Messiah. So there we go, the book of Esther. Any thoughts, feedback,
It's just a very
reflection?
cool book. I mean, very dramatic. We kind of went through it, but as you read it verse by verse, just the way it unfolds
Mhm.
and all the challenges,
Mhm.
it's one of my favorite Old Testament books.
Yeah, and it's really meant to be that way. It's such a celebratory book. You can see why plays and spiels and dramatic retellings and songs and it's like it's a book really celebrating the kindness of God. Even though he's not named. One Jewish literary scholar, I think it was Robert Alter, he said, when you read the book of Esther, you see God at work behind the scenes because the author intended for you to see God at work behind the scenes.
Divine
So
inspiration.
yeah. So I mean, think of some of the key phrases that relate to that. One of the phrases related to the lot falling on Haman says, it chanced upon a chance, which is one way to say that was no accident.
Yeah,
That the
I draw
lot fell on Haman.
I draw parallels like King Cyrus, and I know
Mm-hmm.
we talked about okay, he sent the Jews there so they could create like a buffer zone, but they could have
Yeah.
he could have sent anyone there
Yeah.
to build that area, and the fact that he gave through his treasury and gave them back all their artifacts and they rebuilt the temple. I mean, to me, that just it just seems so clear, obviously in retrospect, that divine movement. And you see the same things with the King Xerxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the chance that he falls in love with a Jewish queen? And what's the chance that
Yeah.
that she can go and appeal to him? And
Mm-hmm.
Haman, who is like his right hand trusted advisor, that he's
Yeah.
just going to take her word and then exalt Mordecai and hang Haman, right? So that
Yeah.
doesn't seem like something that a king would just normally do without some type of divine intervention.
Yeah,
Right.
the two books of the historical books that are kind of one-offs are about the
Mm-hmm.
two women, Ruth and Esther.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh
And
yeah, Ruth is a good book too.
they're both fascinating stories. And you see, once again, even in Ruth, you don't see overtly God being talked about very much, but he's just directing everything. So, Both the books are just fantastic.
Yeah, so true. And for that matter, both are associated with Jewish holidays. I wonder if I have an image I can share with you concerning what they're called the 5 Megillot. Oh, I think I do. Let's see if I can put it in our chat. Let's see, chat. Oh, I think it happened. Are you able to see that?
Not yet.
Okay. What I'm going to do is share screen. And now mine is showing that I sent it in the chat of our call on Teams. So I'm just going to click on this image. Can you can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. This happens to be here. I'm going to hide this. This happens to be a 2-page spread that I had the privilege of writing for Tyndale's Chronological Life Application Study Bible. That was the Messianic Jewish edition. It was a work on which I served on the editorial committee that was commissioned to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Jews for Jesus a couple years back. So I was asked to write this 2-page spread about what are called the 5 Megillot, or the 5 scrolls. And let me just read the intro to you here. Oh, there we go. Can you see it?
Yes.
The 5 Megillot, or scrolls, the Hebrew word Megillah means scroll in the singular, Megillot is plural, are read in connection with 5 important Jewish festivals. Within the Tanakh, a word for the Hebrew scriptures formed by abbreviating Torah, the law, Nevi'im, prophets, and Ketuvim, the writings, these 5 scrolls recall the importance of the 5 books of the Torah, the Pentateuch, and are the 5 shortest books in the Ketuvim, or the writings. Hand-copied Jewish Bibles of antiquity followed the Talmudic tradition of listing books in what was believed to be their chronological order. For the Ketuvim, this order was Ruth, Psalms, Job, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Songs, Lamentations, Daniel, Esther, Ezra, Chronicles. Of these books, Ruth thus comes first within Israel's history. But the 5 Megillot are most often listed according to the order they are read each year in Ashkenazi, or Eastern European, synagogues. That is, in the order of their 5 associated festivals on the annual liturgical calendar. Tradition has linked Song of Songs with Passover, Ruth with Shavuot, also known as the Feast of Weeks or Pentecost or Harvest Festival, the Lamentations with the 9th of Av, which is the Doomsday or the Friday the 13th of Judaism. The 9th day of the month of Av is apparently the date on which both the first temple, 586 BC, and the second temple in 70 AD were destroyed. So the 9th of Av, nobody gets married on the 9th of Av. Again, it's like the Friday the 13th of Judaism. And for that reason, Lamentations is read on the 9th of Av. And further, Ecclesiastes is linked with the Sabbath during the week of Sukkot, also known as the Feast of Tabernacles, booths, or shelters. And Esther, of course, is read in association with Purim. The association of a reading with a festival sometimes reflects a clear historical connection between the book and its holiday. In some cases, however, the connection appears to have had more to do with an emotional or thematic parallel, such as Lamentations. By the way, you notice the graphic there on the left. It simply says an artist's rendering of the 5 Megillot, or 5 scrolls, with their Hebrew titles. You can see the title on the right of this scroll, Shir HaShirim, that would be Song of Songs. The next one, Ruth, or Ruth. Icha, that would be Lamentations. This would be Kohelet, Ecclesiastes. And the last one, Esther, Esther. Our daughter, our firstborn, Netanya, she painted a beautiful painting that is on an easel in my office at home, full size, for this study Bible. The general editor was at our home for a different Jewish holiday, and she, Susan Perlman of Jews for Jesus, said, "Wow, Netanya, I like your art. Do you think you could do a piece for the study Bible project?" And so, since I was asked to write this 2-page spread, she would do one on the 5 Megillot. So there it is. Now, one more thing. You'll notice that this 2-page spread includes a little write-up about why and how Song of Songs is read in association with Passover. By the way, I wrote my dissertation on the Song of Songs, and by God's grace, submitted my final draft on the eve of Passover, 2008. And so that was historic for us, and associated Song of Songs in my own history with Passover. But then Ruth, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, and Esther. So let's look at our book, Esther, and note why it's important related to this 5 Megillot concept. So, Megillat Esther, or the Book of Esther, Purim is the joyous annual celebration of the deliverance of the Jewish people during the time of the Persian Empire under King Xerxes, or Ahasuerus. Through Mordecai and Esther, God was at work behind the scenes to preserve the Jewish people from wicked Haman's plan to annihilate the Jews. The introductory blessing, "Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us by your commandments and commanded us concerning the reading of the Megillah," is recited only before the reading of Esther, of all of the 5 Megillot, due to the specific command that the days of Purim be observed in every future generation, according to Esther 9:28. So it's interesting. This famous blessing that I quoted for you there, it's read every week before the Torah is read in the synagogue. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu. Concerning the reading of the Torah normally, but here, "Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us by your commandments and commanded us concerning the reading of the Megillah." Well, why would this be stated in tradition? Well, because of this specific command to remember, and to in every day, in every generation, remember the days, observe the days of Purim. Now, I think this little chart is also helpful. I'm having problems where to blow this up, but I think we'll get it. there. So you can see that with these varying scrolls, each of the 5 Megillot, or 5 scrolls, has a usage in Jewish liturgy. So we state which holiday they are associated with. And then I also share a little relationship to the New Testament, which of course is not going to be something that shows up in Jewish literature of the rabbis, but it is something that we should appreciate in light of the totality of the scriptural narrative, Genesis to Revelation. So, Song of Songs is, of course, read on the eve of Passover, mainly because of its allegorical interpretation, that it speaks about, according to a misinterpretation through allegorizing the love poems, they make it a story of God's love for Israel, calling Israel not out to the wilderness in a literal sense, as per the verses in the song, but calling Israel out of Egyptian bondage to the wilderness where he gave them the Torah, and speaks therefore of God's love for Israel. Whereas in the New Testament, the marriage metaphor is also applied to Messiah's love for the church. By the way, that's the reason that throughout the history of interpretation of the Song of Songs, which has often been called the history of the misinterpretation of the Song of Songs, just like the rabbis had allegorized these love poems to make them speak of God's love for Israel, early church leaders, early Christian interpreters also took the same inappropriate approach to allegorizing these love poems, but applied them to Christ's love for the church. We can say, though, that appropriately, without allegorizing, if the Song of Songs is speaking about marital love, Ephesians, in the very commands about how a husband should love his wife, Paul goes on to say, but I'm speaking to you of something even better. In other words, marriage itself is a metaphor for Christ's love for the church. Marriage and the commitment of marriage, the covenant of marriage, teaches us something about how Christ loves his bride, one of the images of the church. The church is, of course, not only the bride, but other images, the flock of God, think of other images of the church, the body of Christ, the church is called, and many other images. So the book of Ruth, by the way, Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, known as Pentecost in the New Testament in the Greek language, this harvest feast, it illustrates the ideal, not of love like Song of Songs, but of kindness. Remember this chesed, this kindness that Boaz showed to Ruth, and that Ruth showed to her mother-in-law, Naomi. The Spirit prompted believers to generously share the gospel and their resources, which is seen in the generosity and kindness of the early believers in Acts chapter 2 gathered on the day of Pentecost. Lamentations, that 9th of Av, in which Lamentations is read. Lamentations relates to a theme of suffering. As God's people, we bring losses and laments before him because he cares for us. In fact, 1 Peter 5:7 encourages casting all our care upon him because he cares for us. Ecclesiastes, which is read on the Shabbat or Sabbath of Sukkot, the Sabbath day during the Feast of Tabernacles, also called the Feast of Booths or Shelters, it has a theme of rejoicing. Sukkot is clearly a happy holiday and reminds us that even in sorrow, the Lord can bring joy through his Spirit. John chapter 7 is a passage that is given a context in John's Gospel during the Feast of Tabernacles, or Sukkot. Further, the book of Esther, our book this evening, associated with the Feast of Purim, read at this holiday, which, by the way, once again, here on March 2nd, 2026, we are in this holiday right now. Jewish people around the world are having their Purim spiels and parties, are reading the book of Esther, are booing for Haman and cheering for Esther and Mordecai. Speaks of deliverance.
What
And
was the timeline, the date of Esther when this story took place?
well, during the Persian Empire.
During the Persian, well, yeah, during the Persian Empire. But is there?
I think I was
That's-
looking at my notes today, and I think what I saw, it may have come from the textbook, was somewhere in the 470 to 450 BC type range,
470 to 450. Okay.
which is kind of in that same time frame as when, Ezra was around and Nehemiah was around,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in a moment, maybe we can take a look at a couple study Bibles and just take a quick look and see if some evangelical sources have a typical date. I can't remember that. And we'll just conclude here on stating that, of course, the theme of...
But it's post Ezra and Nehemiah.
Oh, yeah, certainly that.
Yeah.
Well, it's post the rebuilding of the temple. I mean, the rebuilding of the temple was in the, early 500s. But then, it's several decades later where Ezra and Nehemiah actually appear on the scene in Jerusalem and do their reforms and build the wall. Nehemiah builds the wall, but that's more like in the same time frame that we're talking about here for Esther. That's what I remember reading.
Okay.
I've got some study Bibles open.
Yeah, the MacArthur Study Bible opens with this line that the author remains unknown. Although Mordecai, Ezra, and Nehemiah have been suggested, whoever penned Esther possessed a detailed knowledge of Persian customs, etiquette, and history, plus particular familiarity with the palace at Susa, according to chapter 1, verses 5 through 7. He also exhibited intimate knowledge of the Hebrew calendar and customs, while additionally showing a strong sense of Jewish nationalism. Possibly a Persian Jew who later moved back to Israel wrote Esther. And then here concerning the date, Esther appears as the 17th book in the literary chronology of the Old Testament and closes the Old Testament historical section. Remember, it's the last book of the Ketuvim. Only Ezra chapters 7 through 10, Nehemiah, and Malachi report older or later Old Testament history than Esther. The account in Esther ends in 473 BC, before Ahasuerus died by assassination in 465 BC. Esther chapter 10 verse 2 speaks as though Ahasuerus' reign has been completed. So the earliest possible writing date would be after his reign, around the mid-5th century BC. The latest possible date would be prior to 331 BC when Greece conquered Persia, because there's no mention of the rise of the Greek Empire and Alexander the Great.
So probably around 450.
Yeah, somewhere in that area. And you said you had another study Bible there.
Yeah, just, briefly, like this is an NIV study Bible. It just says the date is sometime after 460 BC.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's also too the difference between when did the events happen and when was the book written. There can be differences by several years or decades. See, I've got another one here. Let's see if I get a different date in this one. This is my CSB study Bible. It's given the same thing, basically. It says the latest datable event is in 470 BC. It must have been written, it says, between 470 and 100 BC. 100
Big,
seems late.
that's a big
That's pretty-
range.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it says the use of the Persian but not Greek words favors authorship early in that period. So
Yeah.
more in the 400s, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
There we go.
All right, thank you. I didn't mean to get us all digressed into that, but
that's okay. I like the dating. I like to know my time frames here. You know, when all this stuff
Mhm.
has happened. Gives me something solid to kind of base my thought pattern on.
Yeah, I think even we want to go a little earlier than 450 because the reign of Ahasuerus concludes in 464. So somewhere close to there though.
Yeah.
Somewhere close to there. And again, we look at for dating issues of internal evidence. What does the text say, if anything, to give us some parameters? And then external evidence. What other things do we know from what was going on in world history or that is preserved in the archaeological record to give us a terminus ad quem and a terminus ad quo, you know, a beginning and an ending kind of set of brackets to say in here somewhere. Well, thanks for letting me share with you a little bit about the scroll or the Megillat
yeah, no,
Esther,
thank you. Thank you for doing
the
it.
scroll of, and again, you have that in your chat there. If you can download that if you'd like, that's a couple pages out of the Chronological Life Application Study Bible by Tyndale. Well, I believe we have arrived at our closing time, and we've also arrived at our last of 8 sessions together. And
Boo!
yeah, there we go. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Doctor. I really appreciate it. I know I got a lot out of the course. I'm sure John did as well.
Yeah. So I have a couple questions.
Sure.
This synopsis that we went over on the book of Ezra tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Now we had these for several of the books that you had us. You know, we could refer to them or print them out, but not all of them. Do
That's
you have
right.
the other ones? I mean, did you write the other ones or
I
okay?
never
You just
did.
wrote selected ones. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was my first question. And then the second question would just be, you know, we need to take our test this week.
Mhm.
What do we need to do as studying for that? Do you have hints or a study guide or anything that we need to refer to?
Yeah, let's look at that. So as it says, and I wrote these a long time ago, and Dr. Gromacki gave his input as well. We changed a few of these questions, but there are, in the end, 50 questions. There are true and false, multiple choice questions. Some call that multiple guess. In fact, some European and Israeli friends have said, oh, you mean an American exam? Like where all the answers are there possible for you. Not like their exams where they just produce some wildly obscure question and you're supposed to write for 4 or 5 pages and hope that you work your way out of it. So, no. These are 50 questions that are all, the right answer is there, and it can be true or false. It can be letter A, B, C, or D, or, it could be all of the above, or it could be none of the above, things like that.
Are
No
we allowed
helps.
to use our notes, or is this just like all off of memory?
Well, that's what I'm reading to you next. No helps can be used.
Okay.
Do your best for the glory of the Lord Jesus Christ. 100 points. So each of them is worth 2 points. I can tell you that I hate exams that try to trick the student. So none of these are meant to say, ooh, I knew I'd get them if they just read that word wrong, or they read over the of, or they, missed the whatever,
Gotcha.
none of them are gotcha questions.
Yeah.
Um, and they do attempt to cover all of them, so they won't be all from Genesis or all from Esther or something like that. There'll be an attempt to cover the broad strokes and to emphasize what I have emphasized during our lectures, rather than something that is buried in one of the many PDF documents on, page 75 of something someone else wrote. So,
Well,
does
what I
that help?
remember, and if memory serves me right, what was nice about the test is when I've taken the test before, it's graded immediately, so you see exactly
Yeah,
what you did. And it
exactly.
also, if I remember right, the questions that you got wrong, it shows you, and it shows you what the right answer was. So you aren't just left hanging with this, oh, I got a 90%. I don't really know what I got right or what I got wrong.
Right.
It allows you to see what you actually did. So if
Mm-hmm.
if I remember right, I think that's how that's set up. So which is kind of nice.
Yeah. So, just look back over what we emphasized. I mean, think about going back to the very first session. What are some of the documents that I shared with you on Genesis, like the Gilgamesh epic? And, you know, was narrative, the Epic of Gilgamesh, was it parallel to the creation account or the flood account? How's that for a question?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the right
Yeah.
answer
Creation,
is
right?
no.
Oh man, I
That's
better
the
look back.
Enuma Elish
Ah,
is the
yeah.
creation, but the Gilgamesh is the flood. Yeah. Um, I also emphasize 3 elements of the um, Abrahamic covenant. We had that graphic up a number of times, like the umbrella covenant with land, seed, and blessing, or land, descendants, and blessing.
Mhm.
Yep.
I'm gonna be good
Um,
on all the covenant stuff because that's what my paper's on.
hey, there we go.
Yeah. Well, my paper's on the Abrahamic covenant, so I should hopefully get most of them right anyway.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, I haven't even begun the study for the final exam. I'm still furiously trying to finish my paper. So,
Yeah.
and that's more points. So,
Yes. And that's the way it should be, because
yeah.
you're in a lot more control of whether or not you write a good paper than whether you pass a test where it's blind in the dark. Who knows what they're going to ask me? You have a lot more um, control over how well you do in the paper.
Yeah, I've actually, outside of, our discussions, I've probably learned the most in this class of going through this paper. And even though it's a condensed subject matter, just all the research and that I've done, even things that I haven't used and then picked and choose and put in my paper. I'm pretty happy with the way that my paper is coming along. I think you're going to really love it.
Oh, good. I can't wait. It's going to be great. The pump is primed.
Yeah.
So Paul, after this class, what's your next class?
Hermeneutics.
Okay.
Yeah, so
when
that's
is that?
March 15th.
Okay. You're starting right into that.
Yeah, so I see the syllabus. It doesn't seem like it's as much work as this one, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
No, I would agree. I think that was the first class I took. There's no research paper.
Yeah, it looks like we're gonna do like a complete analysis of James, the book of James.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If I remember right, there's no research paper, and of course there's no books to outline. Both of those take a lot of time. There's other assignments that take time, but
Yeah. And there's a supplemental reading, but I've already been reading that kind of at night, so I'm pretty well through that. So
good. Is Dr. Gromacki teaching that?
I'll tell you right now. I don't think so, but I'll tell you who it is.
Well, this is the first class I've had where it wasn't Dr. Gromacki, so.
Well,
Whoa.
and again, let's see what the syllabus says here.
That's because I took hermeneutics and I took the 3 New Testament courses.
Dr. Stephen Mapes.
Mapes, okay.
Mapes, yeah.
Do you know him?
Yeah. I think you'll have a great experience.
Yeah, so that's
now there's 2 Dr. Mapes. Is Stephen the one that just got his doctorate, or is that another one? Because I know
it says
one of
Stephen
them-
H. Mapes, if that helps.
one of them was Dr. Gromacki's assistant while he was finishing up his PhD, which he received last May, I believe. But on staff at Calvary, I think there's 2 Dr. Mapes now, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow, okay. I'm looking it up.
All right, guys, I'm gonna peel out of here because I'm gonna go upstairs. I have visitors upstairs.
Okay.
All right.
But again, it was great taking the class with you guys, and it was nice doing it in this kind of small setting. I don't know if all the classes are like this, but I envisioned intuitively before I took this class, there'd be like 50 people on the screen. And this is nice that it's been very conversationalist.
Yes. Well, tell your friends, and maybe there'll be 5 more next semester.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Well,
all right. Thanks,
God's blessings.
guys.
Paul. Good to see you.
God bless. All right, bye.